Hi everybody! Today we are going to revisit some of our previous works and do a little makeover session. We'll be going over a few older pieces to see what we can improve and refine. Some of the changes will be very subtle, others might be a little bit more dramatic, but the goal is the same, to improve what we did when we didn't know what we do know now. So today, we are going to fix up a few pieces using the skills we have now to elevate them. Let's begin with this first one. This is a portrait of Tom from the second part of our dog portrait series. It was the last one in that series, and to be honest, I think I was a little bit tired by then, and I ended up placing his eye slightly off. So this is just a simple fix. I just cover the eye with a thick, undiluted layer of watercolor to mask the original. And once it's dry, I paint the eye in the correct place, and that's it. Quick and easy. Next up, I painted this pear for my kitchen, but it was too large for the frame I was using. And I didn't want to swap the frame because it is the perfect size for the area. I just wanted the fruit to better fit the space. So I decided to repaint the entire piece. Smaller this time and better proportioned. It's a very simple composition. I didn't even sketch beforehand. You know how to draw a pear, right? Start with that classic 8 shape, then go from there. It's all very freehand, nothing to elaborate, and that's a charm. I have already explained how I paint, but I'll go over it once more just to make sure it's clear. First, I apply a flat layer of color. The texture you see comes naturally from the brushwork, but it's just a flat coat of paint. Once the layer dries, I add a bit of volume using contrast colors. This layer is still flat as well. After it dries, I add a third and final layer for shadows and highlights, and that's it. If you want, you can stop at the first step or go through the first two. It really depends on the look you're aiming for. For a more natural feel, just follow this process, okay? One layer for the base color, another for volume, and the final one for shadows and highlights. Simple as that. Once I placed the new pear in the frame, I realized I didn't like the reddish tone anymore. So I painted it over with a more natural yellow-green, and I think that worked much better. Now onto something a bit different. I had this old canvas that I painted a few years back when I was experimenting with this kind of style of compositions. I never used it, but the canvas is good, so I decided to paint over it. That's a great way to recycle materials. Rather than throwing things away, you give them a second life. Plus, it's a great surface to practice on. I am recreating one of our older botanical compositions, one that we did with watercolor a few months ago. But this time I am using acrylics. The process is basically the same, but acrylic dries quickly, so I need to work fast to get the blending right. Other than that, it is the same as watercolor. As I go, I keep the composition simple and neat. The shapes can be irregular, but the edges must be clean and sharp. That contrast gives the piece its character. I like things to feel rustic and raw, but I don't like them to look careless. There's a difference between something being organic and something being sloppy. Next up, I had a leftover paper from a previous session. It was a painting that wasn't quite working, so I didn't even finish it. But the paper was still in good shape, so I kept it to use some other time. To cover the old paint, I had to apply 2 layers of paint, leaving time to dry between coats. Once it was done, I realized it might have looked better with a darker background. That's something we'll try in a future session, okay? Botanicals on dark backgrounds. But for now, I think this version works just well. You know that here we value texture, boldness, and the raw, organic feel of the handmade art, but we also keep it simple and meaningful. So here's our freshly recycled piece. The issue with this one wasn't the concept, but the colors. I tried to replicate the original palette, but the blue was too intense for this context. Just because it works on a record cover doesn't mean it will work as a painting. So I covered the blue with a layer of white and another of pale cream. You can still see a bit of the old blue layered underneath. And it still reads as an interpretation of Grace Jones. But now it is more subtle and also more versatile. Another piece from the same series, and we are going to refine the color. I liked the concept, the fade in and fade out effect. But once it was finished, it felt chaotic because was too much going on. So I decided to simplify it. I kept the same composition but switched to solid colors. One for the background, one for the main figure, and another color to the little bird, which becomes the accent point of the whole piece. It's minimalist, it's an abstraction, but the texture brings it to life. Here, I use a technique I often apply at the end. I am using a very diluted yellow wash, the same yellow of the bird, all over the painting. It adds warmth and unity to the piece. But this only works with acrylics or oils, and only once the paint is totally dry. In case of watercolor or gouache, only if the piece is already varnished. Otherwise, the wash will ruin the painting. And finally, the last one for today. This one was also part of the same series. The concept is great. It's a hybrid of figurative abstraction with organic colors. But in this case, the execution felt a bit messy and the finish wasn't quite there. So I decided to keep everything: the organic feel, the interplay between abstract shapes and natural colors. But this time I aimed for a cleaner, more refined result. We still want to feel the human touch, but that doesn't mean that the work should be sloppy. So I softened the texture, I sharpened the edges, and although it remains the same composition, this new version feels more polished, balanced, and complete. There is always something to learn and always room to grow. And to bring it all together, I applied a warm wash at the end to unify the tones. And here are the before and afters, so you can decide for yourself which versions you prefer. Personally, I think the newer versions reflect more my taste and look better. But of course, taste is personal, so it's also subjective. More importantly, I hope this video helped you see how revisiting older work can be a valuable part of your artistic journey. As always, keep on practicing and thank you for joining us.